Yes, UFC. I ain't got shit better to do than sit around and wait for some fights. Shit. Oh, hello everyone. AFMMA here. Pardon my earlier outbursts. I've become quite spirited in the absence of the UFC over this past weekend, and I believe the lack of good old blood, sweat, and tears has left me quite pent up, and for that, I do apologize. Anywho, what's up guys? It's Alex Miner here with another episode of AFMMA Analysis, episode 3. Basically in this episode, seeing as there's not too much going on right now in terms of fights, anything like that, I'm going to go back over the UFC 25th anniversary press conference, seeing as I didn't touch on it earlier. It was 2 weeks ago, happened the day before UFC 227, the card that TJ fought Cody Garbrandt on and DJ fought Henry Cejudo on. Basically what they did is what they do at the end of every year. They basically roll out all of the fights, the big cards that they have going towards the end of the year just to get the fans excited. And this time they had a lot of big fights, a lot of big announcements, and there's a lot to be excited about. Some of the cards, some of the fights have changed since then. It has been 2 weeks, so there has been some dropouts, there has been some new developments. I'm going to save those for the end of the video just to save time, keep it in order I'd like it in. So yeah, here we go. In the first fight on the schedule, we have Gaethje versus Vic. Basically, if you've been watching, Gaethje is the guy that just came in from World Series of Fighting. He was undefeated over there. I believe like 13-0 coming in. He was the champion. He fought Michael Johnson in his first fight. Had a lot of early trouble because Michael Johnson's got them hands really fast, really powerful boxing technique, and he had Gaethje in trouble. But the thing with Gaethje is, what people realize from his very first fight is he will take the damage because he's just trying to rack up damage on you along the way, and then when you finally start to wane, that's when he starts to just tear into you. Not much technique, and there is good technique, but his main focus is on power and landing on you when he can, usually when you're done landing on him. One of the main things that he does is he holds up his hands and basically takes all your shots, and when he gets a chance, he'll slam a big leg kick from very close range to basically slow you down. And if you leave him standing long enough to slow down, then eventually he's going to use all the energy that he's been saving to take your freaking head off, basically. And he's going up against James Vick. James Vick is a guy who's been tearing it up in the lower ranks for a while. He came out of Tough. I'm not sure which season. The one that Michael Chiesa won, basically. And in the show, he was a tall, lengthy boxer, really slick striking, really quick, just very skillful with his hands. And he didn't make it to the end. I believe he got subbed at some point in the show, if I'm remembering correctly, but it's been a while. But since then, he's been tearing it up. He's had several knockouts. I believe he's on probably at least a 10-fight win streak, probably more so. And he's finally getting a fight against somebody in the top 10. Gaethje's in the top 5 to 7 range. Gaethje's been losing ever since he fought Michael Johnson, but he's only had 2 fights since then, and those were against Eddie Alvarez and Dustin Poirier, which are 2 of the best 55ers in the UFC division. So yeah, not a bad competition to lose to, but his style, his kind of MMA style rope-a-dope, just taking shots until the guy wears himself out and then coming back at him hard later, it takes its toll on the body. And sometimes he may never get the opportunity to capitalize on all the damage to the legs he's done and the tiring of his opponent, because they may put him out before they get tired. Because these guys that he's fighting in the top 5 are no jokes. Dustin Poirier, no joke. Eddie Alvarez, no joke. Both have very high boxing skill. And they both had some trouble with Gaethje because he's a very tough fighter, but they eventually took him out because they were just using the better game plans. They were the ones leading the dance. They were the ones landing, and they eventually caught him and put him away. James Vick is going to be a lot more methodical, a lot more. He's going to be a lot more elusive. I mean, not that he is 70% focused on illusion. He's a very aggressive, a very offensive fighter, but he's not going to be in there just trying to take shits to get one. He's going to land on you and won't let you land on him. I mean, he already has a very significant reach advantage. James Vick is one of the tallest 55ers in the division, if not the tallest, and Gaethje's more average size. So honestly, I see this being possibly a good come-up fight for James Vick. I mean, if he sticks to the game plan, just beats him up from the outside using his phenomenal boxing and his knees that he's very well timed at, he's going to get the job done most likely, because Gaethje's been taking so much damage. Guys basically know how to beat him after Eddie Alvarez and Dustin Poirier dispatched of him in very similar manners. James Vick is only going to go in there knowing that if he just puts together good, hard striking for an extended period of time, maybe from the first through the second, if it gets that long, he's going to be able to put him away, because he's a very skilled boxer, just like Dustin Poirier and Eddie Alvarez. The only thing is, he's much longer, so he's a lot safer when he's throwing these strikes than they were. So I'm predicting it for James Vick, but you never know what's going to happen in the UFC. Gaethje can catch him with a shot and put him down. You never know. The next fight was Nico Montano versus Shevchenko. Nico Montano, she was the tough winner of the women's flyweight division, the series where they crowned the flyweight champ. She was actually picked low in the show, and she surprised a lot of people with her performances. She's pretty well-rounded, skilled in most areas. The main thing with her is, though, she just always wanted it more than her opponent, and she rises to the occasion. There were several people in the show that had much higher prospects of beating her just because of their experience and their success in other women's organizations, but it didn't stop her. She was actually more of an unknown, but she came through and she cleaned everybody out that she fought. Not that she didn't have hard fights, like her finale fight for the belt with Roxanne Modafferi. It should have been with Sijara Eubanks, but yeah, I mean, she's a very gritty fighter, and she's going to fight for what she thinks is hers, which was the belt, and which she earned. Since she won the belt about a year and a half ago, she hasn't been doing much. She had injuries. I think she was dealing with a foot injury and some other health issues. In the meantime, since the 125 division opened, it opened up the door for people like Shevchenko, who was small for 35 but was still fighting there and was fighting at the top of the division. She had 2 very close matches with the current champion, Amanda Nunes, and she beat Holly Holm, one of the best in the division, handedly in the striking exchange. What many people thought was Holly Holm's biggest strength over that division, she totally dismantled her. She's easily the best women's kickboxer I've ever seen in the UFC, and that's including Joanna Jędrzejczyk and Rose. And apparently Joanna has been beaten by Shevchenko in actual Muay Thai bouts or kickboxing, with either one. Plus, we got to see in several of her fights at 135 that she also was very skilled with her jiu-jitsu. She can catch you, and I believe she caught a jiu-jitsu practitioner in a submission during a fight. That's how she beat this girl. I'm forgetting her name right now, but it was very impressive. She is very high level in both aspects of the game, and although Nico Montano is pretty well rounded and she is a first belt holder and she really goes for it. She really will go for it like she wants it. However, Shevchenko is just a different beast. She's been waiting for a division that she actually fits into as far as size, although she was competing at the highest level with Amanda Nunes. Almost beat her the first time that they fought, but Amanda basically took the first 2 rounds, so she won the bout even though she tired, and Shevchenko won the later round. And then the second fight, it was very close as well. If it had gone either way, it was very technical. No knockouts or anything like that, considering Amanda Nunes is the hardest hitting female fighter in the 135 division. So yeah, a lot of people think basically Shevchenko's going to get in there and get it done and be the new 125 champ and is going to dominate. I can't really deny it. I can't disagree with him. She is a monster. She is probably one of the best female fighters we're going to see in the UFC. She is very skilled. She just hasn't got the recognition that she deserves because she hasn't been able to get a belt yet. She wasn't in a division that catered to her actual size. So now that there is, I think she's going to do work and get that belt. Once again, I could be wrong. Montano might be able to get by once again on just wanting it more, but Shevchenko has been waiting for this opportunity for years. So I already know that she wants it. I already know that she's more than determined and has all the skill to back it up. So that'll be a good one. That fight's on September 8th. It's actually the co-main. And the main event is, of course, Woodley versus Till. September 8th, once again. Yeah, this fight was kind of thrown together within the past 2 to 3 weeks. Basically, Covington was supposed to fight Woodley after he won the interim belt over RDA. They had the big storyline and everything. Covington's been talking shit for the longest, doing that WWE crap. But when the time came to actually fight Woodley, seeing as Woodley had been wanting a fight before they even put an interim belt up for grabs at the fight between Covington and RDA, he was saying he was going to fight very soon, and he wanted to fight as soon as possible, while Covington was saying after the fight that he would fight Woodley as soon as possible, but then apparently there was an issue with his sinuses. He couldn't breathe. Apparently he fought through it with the RDA fight, but apparently it got worse afterwards. I don't know. He had to go and get an elective surgery to correct that, so he didn't want to get into a fight until November. Seeing as the champ is already ready to fight and he hasn't fought in almost a year, of course the UFC is going to give him a fight. They give him Darren Till, the up-and-coming Englishman, who's been making a lot of noise in the division. He's a very high-level, highly aggressive, very powerful, very big welterweight. Is only cutting down to this weight class for a certain amount of time. He's been doing it for a while apparently, but it's obviously not something he can do for very long. He missed weight his last fight with Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. Apparently there was something about him having to go visit a relative or a girlfriend at the hospital, and in that time he didn't do what he needed to do to get down to weight for that last fight. Apparently he missed weight for another fight earlier in his career in the UFC. Hopefully it doesn't happen again. Woodley already said he would fight him regardless because Woodley just hasn't fought in a while. He wants to fight. It's going to be a very interesting fight. It'll be kind of like Woodley when he fought Wonder Boy, because Woodley just trained with karate practitioners and really got ready for that blitz and that very unorthodox style that UFC fighters aren't used to, because there aren't many high level karate fighters in the UFC that are successful. Um, Till is different. He's a Muay Thai fighter, Englishman that grew up fighting Muay Thai in Brazil and training Jiu-Jitsu over in Brazil. Um, it's going to be much more dangerous for Woodley, because Till just beat Wonder Boy in their own striking game. Till is probably the only guy who can match Woodley for power in the division. He's much taller, much bigger. There's a significant disadvantage for Till when it comes to the wrestling, which is one of Woodley's greatest strengths, his base, after all. That'll be an interesting fight. I have no idea how it may play out. If Till can implement his game, he will usually just back a guy down, put pressure on them, may not even be throwing strikes, but his presence, he's just a very tall, standing, big Muay Thai striker, and he just kind of presses guys back into the cage and manages to just catch them when it's worse for them. And he's very powerful, as I said, so one shot will put you down. It happened in the 4th or 5th round between him and Stephen Thompson, who's a very elusive fighter himself. Woodley actually tends to back himself in the corners often, leading guys in, giving them a false sense of security so he can blast them, using his foot to push himself off the cage in combination with his already very high power in his right hand. So yeah, anything could happen in this fight. It seems as though somebody might get knocked out, but you never know. Woodley plays it very close to the game plan. He doesn't take unnecessary risks. He can push you out at any point if he catches you slipping. Darren Till is the same way. Woodley will most likely look to get into the ground several times because he has the biggest advantage there. So we'll see how that fight plays out. That fight, once again, September 8th. That's a couple weeks from now, 2 or 3 weeks from now, so it'll be a good fight to wait for. September 15th, Mark Hunt versus Alexei Olenek. September 15th, yeah, Mark Hunt has been around for a while. He's a ex-K1 kickboxer. His main thing, he's the big, hard-hitting Super Samoan that will catch you one time in the chin and walk away and know that he put you out. Olenek, from what I've heard about him, is more of a submission practitioner, jiu-jitsu guy. It'll be interesting. Mark Hunt doesn't get taken down too often. But I'm assuming that's what Olenek will want to do, because I know he doesn't want to stand up with Mark Hunt in those dangerous hands that he has. So it'll basically just be a classic grappler versus striker match. Whoever can get the fight into their realm, if Mark Hunt can keep it on the feet, or if Olenek can get it to the ground and capitalize on the submission, just depends on who gets there first. And then on September 22nd, it's Teixeira versus Manuwa. Glover Teixeira versus Jimmy Manuwa. Glover Teixeira, he's a veteran in the game, been around for a little while, got into the UFC a little bit later than he should have, was doing good, was down in Brazil, trained with Chuck Liddell, but he couldn't get into the USA for a while, so it took a while for him to get in. Once he did well, but he can only get to a certain level, maybe like top 3 in the UFC back in the day, and since then he's just been a guy that likes to stand up and box. He's a very powerful boxer, very big, very thick. He also has good ground control and jiu-jitsu. but he mainly likes to stand up and trade, unless he knows that he has to mitigate a guy's power. And that might be what he wants to do against Jimmy Manuwa, who's also a very big, very powerful, very athletic boxer type of fighter. Jimmy Manuwa came in getting knockouts, brutal knockouts, guys like OSP. But then at other times, he was getting caught left and right by guys you would have thought that wouldn't be able to trade with him on that level. It seems like his chin might have gone a little bit in the recent years. We'll see what he has to offer. We'll see if he's come back with something new, or if we're just going to see two older sluggers, two older vets in there just trying to take each other's heads off, and whoever connects is going to win. On October 27th, it'll be Volkan Ozdemir versus Anthony Smith. This one is very interesting, actually. It's in the light heavyweight division. Basically, Volkan Ozdemir is a very big, brawling, swing for the fences type of 205er. Not the biggest, not the most thickly muscled, but has a lot of power, obviously. He came in around last year before that. People didn't know who he was at first, but he just started knocking guys out left and right, including the aforementioned Jimmy Manuwa. And nobody saw that coming, but he just went straight at him, got him against the fence, bowed him, and put him out. That's kind of what he was known for. He came out of nowhere, maybe he had 3 or 4 fights in the year, and he finished almost every guy in the minutes within the first round because he connected and he just cleaned up shop. Anthony Smith has been almost the exact same. Volkan Ozdemir's rise stopped when he was placed against Daniel Cormier, because Daniel Cormier just did what he did, dominated the wrestling exchange, put him on the ground, and then basically got a TKO. Anthony Smith, he's a guy that was at 185 at one point, then he raised to 205. He's been winning ever since, knocking guys out in the first round, just like Volkan Ozdemir. Not too long ago, he knocked out Rashad Evans. I believe that was his most recent fight, actually. And he also knocked out a few other big names. They are not current. His most recent fight was against Shogun Rua, and his fight with Rashad Evans was the one before. Knocked them both out cold, beautifully, brutally in the very first round. 2 legends, 2 ex-champs of the 185 division. And that's why they're basically pairing up the exact same type of fighter. I believe Anthony Smith is definitely more athletic and uses a bit more precise skill than Volkan Ozdemir does. Both have very similar levels of power. Basically, it'll be who lands in this one as well. Like I said, I believe Anthony he's taller. I believe he's a little more skilled. He's younger. Has yet to taste defeat in the 205 division, I believe. Volkan Ozdemir is the guy that was just at the pinnacle and was pushed back because he had to realize his limits. Daniel Cormier is just an all-around great, so he knows his place for the time. So whether that'll affect things or not, who knows? Great fight, like I said. On November 3rd, we have 3 huge fights, and they were all there, except for Romero and Costa, but I'll get back to that one. In the co-main event, there's Poirier versus Nate Diaz. This is a very big fight. Dustin Poirier just got done defeating Eddie Alvarez, Justin Gaethje, and had another fight with Eddie Alvarez that was controversial before, that was ended in no contest due to illegal knees, all in the same year. He beat Gaethje, knocked him out. He beat Eddie Alvarez in the rematch, knocked him out, got his revenge, basically putting himself in line for the championship. Even Khabib said that he was his first pick for somebody to come for the championship belt if it weren't for McGregor. Very skilled boxer, very slick, very good on the ground, very good jiu-jitsu. He's going up against Diaz, Gracie level, black belt, very slick on the ground, might be better than Dustin Poirier. Poirier might be a lower belt. I'm not sure if he's a black belt yet. He may have just received it not too long ago. I'm not certain. However, I believe Diaz might have the advantage in that exchange. However, Dustin Poirier is very high level, so he can defend himself to stay out of that exchange if it goes to the ground. As far as boxing goes, they both are very high skilled. Dustin Poirier is definitely tighter in his boxing. Diaz, he is very good at capitalizing on long distance boxing, really good at turning at the end of his punches, keeping distance, but he also takes a lot of the shots as well. He's not always the most worried about defense. He's worried about getting that pitter-patter going, getting that volume up just like his brother, and eventually taking you out or putting you down to the ground so you can cinch up a choke. Very interesting fight. Diaz hasn't been in a while. People have been waiting for Diaz to come back. He's got a lot of star power. Him and his brother are notorious for just being straight fighters, thugs and fighters. Like, they're the real deal. Stockton, not taking no BS, not about no BS in that cage. Dustin Poirier, like I said, has been looking great. He's been winning a lot since he's been in the 155 division. I think the only guy he lost to was Michael Johnson, and then he had that controversial stoppage to Eddie Alvarez, which ended up in no contest because of Eddie Alvarez's illegal shots. So, very interesting fight. Will the ring rust affect Diaz, who's been out for about 2 years now? Possibly. Dustin Poirier might be at a higher level now than Diaz was at that time too as well. He's definitely in the higher rankings than Diaz would have been. So, very interesting fight once again, although we're not sure if it's going to happen at this point because during the press conference there was an announcement at the end that discouraged Nate Diaz and he walked off, and he's made tweets since then saying that he may not fight on the card because they're not properly putting him out there. They're not giving him the exposure that they need to and giving it to others instead, which you can kind of understand given his situation, having beaten Conor McGregor, the most popular guy in the sport, and arguably beating him a second time as well. So he feels like he deserves a lot, and he really does. He deserves a good amount to be fighting these days because people really want to see him and his brother. So he deserves what he wants. After that fight, there's Israel Adesanya versus Derek Brunson. Another very great fight. Israel Adesanya has fought about 3 times since he's been in the UFC. Fought a wrestler his first time, I believe, Cody Wilkinson. He basically stopped the takedowns, rolled out of some, looked very good in his kickboxing exchange. He basically dominated on the feet. This man has a long history in kickboxing, very successful. Only has lost maybe about 2 or 3 times. And he's been looking great ever since he came to the UFC. He just came in last year and has already got 3 wins. Just in his last fight, he beat Brad Tavares, one of the top 10 fighters. I believe he got a TKO in this fight as well. Brad Tavares is known for his striking prowess and his finishing capabilities. And now he's getting put up against Derek Brunson, who I believe is in the top, I'd say the top 7, top 8 of the division. Derek Brunson, very, very good fighter as well, very good wrestler. He's actually won wrestling exchanges with guys like Yoel Romero, who is a silver medalist in the Olympics, and he never even went to the Olympics. So obviously very good wrestling pedigree, but also within the past few years, he's really learned how to use his power and his striking. However, not the most skilled striker. He kind of tends to run forward and just throw shots from the shoulders, but he's not really, he's just throwing himself too far off balance. And a guy like Israel Adesanya, who is highly trained in kickboxing and uses it well, he's skilled enough on the ground to be confident to use it like he should. I can just see him catching Brunson with maybe a knee at the proper time, or a properly placed uppercut, or maybe even a kick. He's just a very dynamic striker, and the way that Derek Brunson tends to go through those exchanges could be very dangerous for him. And he has been known to get caught for his careless striking style. He just got knocked out by Jacare Souza not that long ago by a head kick. Not to say that that's a bad loss. Jacare Souza is a very skilled, high-level, top 5 185er. Nevertheless, like I said, he just keeps his chin way too open, way too available. He may be able to implement his wrestling and negate Israel Adesanya's best aspect of his game. We'll just have to see. It's another striker versus grappler type, except Derek Brunson also has a lot of power in his hands and can put out his opponents despite the fact of them being higher level strikers. He just knocked out Uriah Hall not that long ago, who was a higher level striker, but he pushes them back, grinds on them, keeps them against the fence where there's little place to move, and if you touch somebody on the chin with those little gloves and as much power as he has, they're going out. So, very interesting fight. And the fight after that is Yoel Romero versus Paulo Costa, the Eraser. Two specimens in the game. Yoel Romero is, 39, 40 years old, has the body of an action figure. People always talk about it. He has a very muscular physique. He's actually very short for the 205 division, or the 185 division, but because of how thickly muscled it is, it still is hard for him to make the weight limit. Or it has been recently in his past few fights. He missed weight in his last fight against Robert Whittaker, where I thought he won, but the fight was given to Whittaker. And he also missed his fight against Luke Rockhold, but he took that fight on short notice, so he didn't have as much time to get down as he normally did. And after the last fight that he missed weight against Whittaker, the UFC was talking about possibly putting him up to 205. He would be very short and probably only about 5 pounds away from his natural weight class, or natural walking around weight at that weight class. Paulo Costa is a humongous 185er, very tall, very muscular, very strong, very powerful. I saw in his last fight against Uriah Hall, he got a KO. However, he's a brawler type. He's just basically plots forward. He'll take shots, but he will land bigger shots on you because he knows he's the bigger man and that he can take your shots to get you back and push you out first. May not be a very good idea with Yoel Romero, who is one of the most powerful one-strike knockout artists I've ever seen. You often see that in guys like him and Derek Brunson, where they come from a wrestling background and they learn how to strike, and the power that they already have in their legs from wrestling just makes their striking so much more deadly. And he's definitely a more skilled striker, more fine-tuned striker than Derek Brunson is, especially training in camps with people like John Jones over at Jackson Wink with the expert level of striking instruction over there. Very interesting fight. Romero, I'd say, is more technical. They both got an equal possibility of knocking the other out because of how much power they have. Paulo Costa is going to have to use a bit more of his head, try to keep from getting hit more, exchanging too much, taking too many high-stake risks, because he could be the one ending up on the canvas this time if he tries to play that game. So, very interesting fight. On November 10th, Oh, by the way, the November 3rd card with all those fights I just mentioned, it doesn't yet have a main event. I don't know why they let that out. It's an MSG card. They're really trying to get a big main event. Um, I heard speculation from Brendan Schaub recently that it might be John Jones. We haven't heard much about his situation recently, where the USADA and WADA are at with his case and when his suspension will be up, whether or not there's been any movement, or whether there's a Tatum supplement or not. You don't know. But who could they find bigger than Nate Diaz coming back, besides maybe Connor? And yeah, who would you put above him? Brent Schaub made a very good point. John Jones is maybe the only other guy that would generate more interest, unless they put DC versus maybe Brock Lesnar on the card, but Brock Lesnar obviously can't do that because he still has to go through the 5 to 6 months of being in the USADA pool, which he's probably going to fail anyway because everybody knows he's juicing. So yeah, hopefully that might happen. The UFC and the MMA world have been missing John Jones, and it'd be great to get him back in the cage. Hopefully he can stay out of trouble. Hopefully he can be a clean fighter. I don't know if he wasn't at any point in time, but he definitely just needs to dot his I's, cross his T's, and stay the hell out of trouble if he's going to come back. On November 10th, in the main event, I believe, it's Frankie Edgar versus Chan Sung Jung, the Korean Zombie. Frankie Edgar, ex-155 champ, been at the top of the division in 145 for a while, fought with Aldo twice, lost both times but had a close fight in the first fight, pretty close one in the second one as well. Basically, Frankie Edgar took a replacement fight after Max Holloway dropped out. A lot of people said he shouldn't have because he had the title shot already, but that's Frankie Edgar. He's in a fight because he wants to fight and doesn't like to stay out of the ring too long, especially if he's been training for one. Took the fight. Everybody thought Brian Ortega's biggest weapon was possibly being able to get him in a guillotine, which is one of his most deadly moves he's seen in the octagon, him choking out Cub Swanson. He's a very high-level Gracie Jiu-Jitsu black belt, very dangerous. But it ended up being the striking. He caught Frankie slipping, stumbled him, and then he ripped one of the most vicious uppercuts I've ever seen to floor the ex-champ like he's never been knocked out before. I don't even believe he had been knocked out before. So it was a very big turn of events. Since then, he's beaten Cub Swanson in a rematch that him and Edgar had, and now he's fighting Chan Sung Jung. Chan Sung Jung, people have not heard about him in a while. I haven't heard about him in a while. He was around maybe a few years back. He was a big name in the division. He challenged Aldo for the belt and lost, but he was beating a lot of top names like Dennis Bermudez, Mark Hominick, some other guys in the top of the division. He was a very high-level contender. Very skilled on the feet, very creative boxing, not always the most worried about defense. He's very offensive. As long as he's hitting you, he's coming forward. He is not trying to, he doesn't need to conserve energy. He just needs to connect to your face. He is a bloodthirsty fighter. He's a zombie. That's the only way you can characterize him. Even if you catch him a little bit, he will still come forward, throwing those hands with bad intentions, and he'll most likely put you out or put you down. And if he puts you down and gets on top of you, it's the end of the night, because he is also one of the most skilled, high-level, aggressive grapplers I've ever seen in the 145 division of the UFC in general. He's the only other guy that would rival Brian Ortega possibly on the ground, and Brian Ortega only came after Chan Sung Jung had to take a long layoff due to having to go into the Korean military. I believe that's where he's been for all this time. But like I said, he was very well known back in the time. He was a high contender. He lost to Aldo, and that was one of the last things we heard of him. And now he's finally coming back after years of us not seeing him. He's a very exciting fighter, very good. You may not have heard of him, but you need to go look him up. Go look up his highlights. He's vicious, and he will be right up there with Aldo, Ortega, and Chad Mendez, Max Holloway, and other types when he comes back. We'll see how he'll meld into this new group, this new wave of fighters. Like I said, he hasn't been around for a while, so they might have evolved a little farther than he dealt with back then. But he might have been doing the same. He might have been evolving this whole time as well. You never know. So it's very interesting that he's coming back, especially against a guy like Edgar. So it's going to be a very good fight. Also on that card, Cowboy Cerrone versus Mike Perry. Two of your favorite strikers, always going out there to take another guy's head off. Cowboy Cerrone, very good Muay Thai, very good Jiu-Jitsu as well. He's a classic guy, very slick with his kicks, and if you go to the ground, he will most likely get a submission off of you. Small for the 170 division, although he stayed there for a while. He won some fights coming up. Cowboys lost to some bigger guys in the division like Darren Till, and it's proven that his size is a bit of a liability in the division. However, he still fights at a very high level. Mike Perry, real welterweight in size, very aggressive fighter, always coming to take your head off with every shot. A lot of people like him. He's a very goofy, very real, very gutted white dude. He's a character. He's just a real dude that loves fighting. He didn't have the right tools when he was first coming up in the game. He had some success at first, knocking out getting some great knockouts in the 170 division. He even knocked out Jake Ellenberger by elbow. However, then Mike Perry started losing to some guys in the division that were just a little more technical, had some better coaching, while Mike Perry was basically, one of his coaches was his girlfriend, who is a tennis trainer and competitor. Mainly a gym that he built, not really a real team. But finally, Mike Perry has chosen to go to Jackson Link after a breakup with his girlfriend and a hard lost fight. And it looks like he's had some improvement since then. He had this fight with Paul Felder a few weeks ago. Looked really good. He was aggressive as usual, but he was just being much more methodical. He even mixed in some takedowns, got 2 or 3 takedowns. Not the most technical, but he has a lot of power to spare. So he was successful. Successful on his feet as well. He beat Paul Felder handily. Paul Felder did sustain a injury. He broke, I believe, his forearm in the very first round from a spinning attack. However, a very good performance from Mike Perry. He's learning, he's developing into a better fighter, and that's what we want to see out of a guy like him, who with so much potential just didn't have the right level of coaching and discipline. Most likely discipline, but just not the right level of instruction and knowledge around him. Interesting too, these men have already sparred with each other. Like I said, Mike Perry's joined Jack Wink camp with John Jones, Holly Holm, Cowboy Cerrone, who's been there for a while. And their new teammates didn't seem to care too much about it. They were really friendly with each other in the press conference. Mike Perry said he wanted to be friendly to Cowboy because he knows that Cowboy is known to do well, be much more of a killer with guys that have a friendly relationship with him. So he brings on that challenge. He's not afraid of a guy being at their best. That's what he wants. He wants to fight the guys at their best. and he wants to get the knockout. So it'll be a very exciting barn burner, most likely. Only way it couldn't be is if it somehow turned out like it was between Francis Ngannou and Derek Lewis, where two of the biggest power punchers got gunshot. However, I doubt that is going to happen with Mike Perry. I doubt it's going to happen with the Cowboy. So be tuned in for that one. Once again, another fight on November 10th. On August 29th, the UFC is rolling out their latest season of The Ultimate Fighter. There was a lot of speculation whether or not this would be the last season of The Ultimate Fighter, seeing as the UFC's deal with Fox is ending, and Fox was the channel that The Ultimate Fighter has been showcased through for years. So it was thought that that basically The Ultimate Fighter was going to die with the UFC Fox deal, and people like Dana White and others in the media were saying that it looked that way. However, Dana White recently said that he's going to continue The Ultimate Fighter when the UFC rolls over into its TV deal with ESPN next year. I was very happy to hear about this. I'm sure a lot of other fans that have been watching for a while are. I personally have watched every single season of The Ultimate Fighter and would hate for it to go. Dana White, his Contender Series that's going on right now, it's a good way to bring in prospects quickly get new blood into the sport. However, you just don't really get the same experience you do with The Ultimate Fighter. Not only is The Ultimate Fighter funneling new great fighters into the UFC, it's also a lot of entertainment, watching the guys and what they have to go through in the house, a tournament like that. It's really the only tournament style kind of show that the UFC has. But the main thing is it really introduces you to the guys' personalities. Guys like Diego Sanchez and Forrest Griffin and Nate Diaz, you wouldn't have really had a great sense of how eccentric these guys' personalities were unless you watched The Ultimate Fighter and got that introduction to them and all the crazy things that they did. And not only do you see their crazy sides, but you also get to see their struggles and where they come from and what they hope to achieve for themselves. And when they finally do achieve it by possibly winning The Ultimate Fighter, I mean, it's great for the fans because you've developed connections to these fighters. You've watched them grow under the tutelage of UFC fighters, often champions that are already great competitors. So they're oftentimes getting 10 times better while they're in the house as opposed to their regular training beforehand. And most importantly, a lot of the Ultimate Fighter winners and even the guys that haven't won have become champions. There's TJ Dillashaw, Forrest Griffin, Rashad Evans, Robert Whittaker, which we're going to go into. But like I said, great show. I'm glad it's not going anywhere, and I feel like the fans will be better for it, and the UFC will be better off for it. But like as I was saying earlier, the coaches this season are Robert Whittaker, the 185 champion, and Kelvin Gastelum, the top contender at the moment, aside from Chris Weidman. Chris Weidman was apparently in talks of being the coach opposite of Robert Whittaker as well. However, he was dealing with a thumb injury after his fight with Kelvin Gastelum, where he won in the second round by head and arm, I believe. So basically got passed up for it. The UFC didn't want to take that chance, seeing as he just recently got back into training. So they put Kelvin Gastelum in. And I don't think it's much of a bad choice because Kelvin Gastelum has won, I believe, 2 more fights after losing to Chris Weidman anyway. One of them notably being his knockout of Michael Bisping. So yeah, speaking of Kelvin Gastelum, just like Robert Whittaker, he came from the 170 division. He couldn't make the weight. I guess he just had dieting issues. He was never big or anything at 170. He was actually pretty soft-bodied in the division. However, he just couldn't make the weight. Robert Whittaker, on the other hand, was a guy who drained himself to get down to that weight and didn't like the way he performed, so he moved up and he's been performing to the best of his ability ever since and hasn't lost ever since. Kelvin Gastelum, almost the same story. Even though he's incredibly undersized compared to the other guys, he's been mopping the floor with pretty much everybody, getting knockouts left and right over guys like I said, Michael Bisping, Tim Kennedy, Vitor Belfort, a laundry list of top contenders in the 185 division that are much bigger, but they just couldn't deal with the speed, the technical boxing, and the power that Kelvin Gastelum possesses in his hands. And the only reason I believe he lost to Chris Weidman is because of size. He almost knocked Chris Weidman out in the very first round. However, in the second, Chris Weidman came out, dragged him to the ground using his big weight advantage, big size advantage, and got the choke. Otherwise, I believe Kelvin Gastelum really deserves this shot, and it's going to be a good season. Robert Whittaker, of course, is coming off his second fight against Yoel Romero. Very good fight. I actually thought that Yoel Romero was going to get the nod. However, he didn't. But yeah, I mean, both fights, he fought Yoel Romero. He got an injury. I believe this time he broke his hand. The time before, he messed up his knee during the fight, and he managed to get through all 5 rounds with one of the biggest power punches in the UFC. Most powerful guys in general in the UFC. Yoel Romero is an explosive freak, and Robert Whittaker is a great champion, and this is going to be a very good season of The Ultimate Fighter, especially considering that both guys are winners of The Ultimate Fighter themselves and have plenty of experience. Once all the reporters were done asking the questions of each fighter, Dana White took it upon himself to make a surprise announcement that he had been holding back for the whole press conference. Like I said, the reporters asked about it before. It was one of the first questions, whether or not there was some progress on the deal between Conor McGregor and Khabib Nurmagomedov. And at the end, Dana White rolled out a big promo revealing all the drama between Khabib and Conor, including the bus attack, including Khabib running up on Conor's boy. It pissed Nate Diaz off. He walked off stage whenever the promo came up because he felt like his fight was then being overshadowed because he was the main attention of the press conference until that video was rolled out and Conor and Khabib weren't even there. So he definitely felt disrespected that he wasn't being promoted the proper way. And it's not hard to find some agreeable grounds with him. However, people have been waiting for Conor McGregor to be announced against Khabib for the longest. A lot of us thought that it would never happen. This fight has been talked about for a few years now. And finally, after all the drama and then Conor finally getting the legal troubles out of the way with New York, it's good to go. People like me, I still didn't expect for them to get this fight done so quickly because there was plenty of time before where they could have got this fight together. And then all this stuff happened. I guess it was just the final straw and it just had to be done. Conor finally wanted to step back in because he had to fight Khabib. Before it was a money thing, and there was some speculation going around whether or not the UFC might have finally agreed to give Conor the stake that he wanted in the company, seeing as he finally signed to fight and finally signed to come back after over 2 years off from MMA. But yeah, it's going to be probably one of the biggest fights in UFC history. It's 2 of the best lightweights ever going at each other. Conor McGregor, one of the best strikers the UFC has seen in a long time. Definitely the best, I believe, in the 155 division. There are some other creative strikers, but he seems to be the ones that puts it together the best in the division. Has had the most success. Um, Khabib Nurmagomedov, the biggest assassin, killer, just punisher you've ever seen on the ground. He drags guys to the floor and he beats them up brutally. Um, just beats the life out of guys for 3 to 5 rounds, however long he has in the cage with him. Uh, he hasn't gotten a lot of finishes in recent history. I'm not sure he hasn't had that many finishes in the past either. The one fight I can recall Khabib getting a finish in is when he submitted Michael Johnson in their fight after beating him to a pulp for, I believe, at least 4 rounds. Um, Otherwise, though, not much of a finisher. Not sure if it's because he doesn't choose to finish guys or he doesn't have the power, but it seems like whenever he's hitting the guys that they're taking plenty of punishment. So I feel like he's one of those guys who likes to drag their opponents through deep waters and just beat the life out of them until they either quit or they just have nothing left to give. Um, However, I don't think that's a good idea against Conor McGregor. We saw in the fight when Conor fought Chad Mendes, even though he got taken down and beaten up for a good portion, when he was finally let up by Chad Mendes, he backed him up against the fence and picked him apart and put him out. And I believe he could do the same thing to Khabib. If Khabib slips up and lets him get back to his feet after he's taken him down, that's just giving him another chance to put his lights out. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of room for error for Khabib in that aspect because he does leave his chin up a lot, and Conor will take that chin. If that left hand connects, he's out of there. And if he keeps on dragging Conor through each round, they stand up at the beginning of each round. So at the beginning of each round, Conor has a chance to put him out, and the longer he doesn't get him to the floor, he might get put out. So very interesting fight. Very small room for error from either guy. Basically, the classic striker versus grappler match on the biggest scale, and the biggest capacity, the biggest stage. Yeah, it's going to be a humongous card, a humongous fight. It's going to bring in a lot of the new fans, all the old fans as well. It'll be a great fight. Since all of these fights have been announced, there has been a dropout. The fight between Jimmy Mano and Glover Teixeira. Glover Teixeira had a dropout due to injury. However, Thiago Santos recently signed on to fill in for the UFC Sao Paulo card going up against Jimmy Mano, and the fight's been agreed upon. In other news, the deal between Chris Weidman and Luke Rockhold has been finalized, so those two will be fighting. What else? I believe that's about it, all that I can think of right now. So yeah, have a good one, guys.